Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. We are both, frankly, pretty excited about this opportunity to talk about the issues that are, really, really important to us in terms of, I think, our professional lives and just that we put a lot of work into over many, many years, and that we're passionate about. So it's great to be able to be here today. Looking forward to having people join us and if you have any questions at all, during today's LinkedIn Live, and we're also streaming on Twitter as well, please feel free to just pop them into the comments, and we will try and address them as we go through. What we're planning to do today is Margot is going to give a bit of an overview of the report and some of the key findings, and a bit of a reflection on that. Then I'm going to give some of my thoughts, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion back and forth on what we think about this kind of a big news in the sector. There haven't been a lot of, there are a lot of stories, I think, that really surface that make an impact like this across the sector. And this one certainly, I think, for good reason, has attracted a lot of attention. And now we're going to be unpacking a bit more about, why it's generated this attention and what does it really mean. So I just want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Jessie. And I am the lead consultant and founder of J.N. Clark Consulting. We are a government relations firm that focuses on helping nonprofits work more effectively with government, win funding from government, and have influence on government advocacy and policy. And we've been around now for 2 years, which is kind of hard to believe. We do work with a wide variety of organizations, a lot of the international cooperation sector as well, but also some others who work more domestically. And we're just really passionate about helping nonprofits be successful with government. And so I occasionally do LinkedIn Lives from time to time on different topics. And, a big part of my interest, my career, my work has been spent in the international cooperation sector, working on gender equality specifically as well. It's a lot of my own background. And so this seemed like such an interesting topic and an important topic to talk about. And I'm very happy to be joined as well by my colleague and fellow consultant, Margot Stevens. So I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Jess. So there was a little bit of a delay, so please forgive me if there's any delays. It might be the storm that's passing through the GTA right now. So my name's Margot Stevens. I'm an independent consultant in the international development sector. I've got 20 years of experience in the sector working with government, with NGOs, and also as an independent consultant, as I'm doing now. So when this report came out, the Auditor General's report on international assistance in support of gender equality, and I saw the subtitle of it, we all kind of like collectively dropped our jaws, and really something we kind of stopped and like, okay, let's get into what it says. So basically, Canada's had a feminist international assistance policy since 2017. And this audit was focused on whether Global Affairs Canada, GAC, has implemented the feminist international assistance policy, which we call FIAP. And they're supposed to do this by funding projects that supported gender equality and empowered girls and women in low and middle income countries. So, that subtitle to this report was Global Affairs Canada is unable to show the value of Canada's international assistance in support of gender equality. We all kind of gasped. And so what the audit was looking at, so what it says it was looking at was that bilateral assistance. It was not looking at funding to humanitarian and multilateral organizations where there was no specific project identified. So it didn't look at like the pooled funds or contributions to that, because we all know tracking results, to pooled funds and contributions to multilaterals can be really difficult. So how did the General carry this out? since 2017, there's been 619 projects approved under Global Affairs for bilateral funding, and they chose a representative sample of 60 projects, and they requested from Global Affairs a slew of documents that would demonstrate whether Global Affairs was meeting the performance indicators of the FIAP. So of the 60, so that included like project implementation plans, gender equality assessments, all the annual reporting, everything. And the projects they looked at, they selected of the 619, the 60 they selected had to have been had to have at least a year's worth of reporting, from project implementation. So this is kind of where we get into, why the audit reached its results, or its findings. Of the 60 projects that were selected, 10 of them could not or would not provide the necessary documentation. There was documents missing that couldn't be recovered, and so this is kind of like where the penny dropped, because at this point the auditor general said, the sample was no longer statistically representative. So at that point, if you don't have the documents to actually audit, then the audit cannot reach findings in favor of GAC having met its commitments under the FIAP. In addition to that, they found that only 35 of those 50 projects that they were able to look at were actually reporting against the FIAP indicators. So an even smaller group of projects were actually reporting against the indicators that were laid out in the FIAP. And it also found that the projects were not reporting against Canada's contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, which we know was, one of the areas of the FIAP was to, Canada's contribution at a higher level. There were global leaders that were aligned with the SDGs. Now, because of the weaknesses of information management within the department, the audit found that results were not being rolled up, and they were not being used at a senior management level to inform decisions. So there was not based decision making going on because of the results that you were assumed to have been measured and aggregated, in line with the FIAP indicators. Another area where they found weakness was in the fact that the within the FIAP, there's a recognition of the intersectionality of the approach to be taken, and this was not measured or assessed systematically through the gender equality assessments. They were not looking at results in an inch. Finally, within the FIAP, there were 3 funding targets. One was that 80% bilateral funds would be spent on projects that integrated gender equality. 15 projects specifically targeting gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and 50% of bilateral funds would be allocated to projects in sub-Saharan Africa. And of those 3 commitments, only the one where 80% of bilateral funds were spent on integrated gender equality, that was the only funding target that was met. So kind of overall, those are the findings of audit. Before I get into my reflections, Jess, did you want to jump in here?
I think maybe just briefly, but I think I want to hear more of your reflections as well. I think a couple of things that have come to mind for me as I've looked at this report and been reflecting over this over the past week and a half. First of all, I always kind of look at things from kind of both the government and the nonprofit perspective, having worked in both areas and kind of understanding, what is behind, different reports and what motivates, different kinds of public pronouncements. And I must say, first of all, that I do have some empathy in the sense that I think it's unfortunate that FIAP, which I think overall, has been an important move for the Canadian government, an important shift for the sector to really focus people on gender equality more generally. It's too bad that this is, one of the headlines that's coming out about it. I feel for people who've been working on this within the sector for many years, who really have been working to really try and make sure that there's impact both within and outside GAC, and demonstrable impact as well. Because it's not a very encouraging kind of headline to see. I think also, when I reflect on it, I think it also reflects, some of I know there's a lot of complexity involved in capturing data and capturing results. Certainly, profound changes of the kind that we're seeking to see through a policy like FIAP. They don't occur in a very short time frame. And sometimes, I think the impact might be there, but not in the sample that was taken, or specifically not in the time frame of some of the reports that were reviewed, et cetera. So, I think like I said, I have some degree of empathy. I think for people inside the government who are really trying to make this an impactful and successful policy. And for all of the partners who have been, rolling up their sleeves and working extremely hard over the past many years to really try and meet those expectations, those rigorous and demanding expectations around gender equality integration into results-based management, gender equality reporting, gender equality frameworks for projects and assessments. That being said, though, I think that it's also good to have public accountability. It's very important in a democracy, and I think it's important to shine light on some of the challenges that maybe are happening in terms of having the impact that they want to have, and what's behind those. And so I think that's kind of, to my mind, the more interesting part of the conversation maybe is so now what, and so what as well. So yeah, those are maybe some very, very quick initial thoughts. I think that it's also always good to push the department to do more and do better, and also to invest more significantly. We've just had this federal budget last week that was very disappointing in terms of the investments in international development. Kind of having that report and then that budget, it's overall for the sector more broadly, it's not a really encouraging picture. And I think, again, maybe it's a bit misleading in terms of the impact that has been seen in the sector, and the potential, if there was greater investment, to have an even greater impact. But and I think one of the things for us to reflect on, and you can speak to this more, and you've mentioned this already, is what were the projects that were looked at, and where were they located? I mean, we don't know, we won't have those details. But I think also who was running them. I mean, to what extent does this reflect the activities of Canadian partners, even at all, is a little bit unclear, because we don't really have that full picture from the report. So yeah, I mean, I hope I'm not sounding too much like I'm doing PR for the department, because that's definitely not my intention, by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I really think that it's important that we have these reports, that we hold their feet to the fire, that we keep the government accountable. But I think I think it's also, as I said, more for me important to reflect on, okay, now what? Okay, so what? And what does this say about what we're doing well and not doing well in the sector as a whole, and what the government needs to do more of and more effectively. So those are just some initial thoughts, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I think, the initial feeling was, when you see something like, you know, they didn't meet the target of 15% invested in projects specifically targeting, gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. I think a lot of us feel like 100% of the projects that we've worked on, over the last, 10 years or so, were targeting very specifically with very rigorous compliance and reporting requirements. And so that it is, it does leave some questions. And I think one of the ones, and this is one of those things, like if you're, sort of inside the sector, when you see the word bilateral, and you think, okay, there was bilateral development assistance, but does that mean like the big B bilateral? Like, does that exclude all of the programming that has been done through partnership branch. And are we talking about, did the sample include all of these very large, programs through partnership branch that have, for support to women's rights organizations, to sexual and reproductive health and rights, where hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent. And so, it is a question, but again, this is what audits are for, right? Audits are supposed to take a representative sample. So it does, hoping that, this type of scrutiny, a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Like, it does lead to improvements across. It's just, when you've spent, what feels like, a lifetime working on projects that support, are specifically designed to empower women and girls, and to support gender equality, it's hard to reconcile. But I think another thing that kind of popped out to me when I was reading it, is when they were talking about, and I'll get into this next, around the actual results they were looking for. Um, you know, yes, they were, projects that have been started since 2017. They've had either, what more than a year of reporting. One of the criticisms was that and this goes back to the FIAP itself, is that the FIAP of its, 26 indicators, 20 of them are output level, right? And so there's a lot of measurement of dollars, and there's a lot of measurement of individual people impacted by programming. Does this mean that global affairs positively impacted gender equality? No, you cannot draw that line between those indicators and gender equality impact level results. So, and again, this is where I feel some empathy for, people within the department, because aggregating results data, whoever can do this well, like, please call me, because it is a struggle to identify results above the output level that can effectively and authentically be aggregated across the breadth of programming supported by global affairs. So that I do have some empathy there, and I think the thing is that that's where we kind of get into a loop, because those results were chosen because they could be aggregated, right? And so I think that there's a big piece of work to be done within GAC, in partnership with its main partners, um, to identify those outcome level indicators that can be integrated into performance reporting frameworks, um, and and can actually, be captured within the life of a project. But that gets to another point I want to make later about impact reporting. So I feel that it was kind of almost like set to fail at being able to measure at the impact level, because so many of the indicators in the FIAP are at the output level, because that is what can be aggregated. So, um, when it comes to, like, what that actually means, for global affairs, we know that global affairs is undergoing this transformation initiative. We also know, though, like, even before that takes place, many calls for proposals, many programs, when the call goes out from global affairs, there are actually outcome level and impact level indicators that are baked into performance measurement frameworks. So when, if I had to give a suggestion, if there was to be a report that would kind of really shine a light on the impact that's taken place, I'm not sure that looking at projects that only have 1 year or more reporting is going to show you that. I feel like you need to take a sample of projects that are closed, projects that have been able to, live their arc through to their end line study. And at the end line, this is really where we're looking at the impact level indicators. The Auditor General did have two suggestions for outcomes that could become, FIAP indicators, and they were
Mhm.
improved health status and increased life expectancy. But like we both know, these are population level indicators, right? These
And then you
cannot
get
be
into
measured
attribution,
by a
right?
project
Exactly,
and
exactly.
attribution,
Yeah.
right? And so they can't be measured within the life of a project and they can't be attributed to a project. And so I think that there's a kind of like a level of sophistication in RBM that RBM has evolved to. I would like
Mhm.
to see the FIAP, indicators reflect that. And I would like to see, within the transformation that, we're accepting the fact that we're looking at social change.
Mhm.
We're not
Yes.
looking at changes that can be measured within the first couple of years. So anyway, that's when it comes to where that finding around just the results that have been achieved. I think those are some things we need to take into account.
I just want to
When it
mention there's a
comes
comment as well
to
here. Sorry,
information
Margot.
management, again, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, which is exactly, and that's what you're referring to. There's a comment as well here talking about the information management and also
Yeah.
about the idea of having standard indicators that you can aggregate, right? Um, I mean, very much what you were just speaking to, but I
Hmm.
think it's true. It is a much more recently. I think under the auspices of the FIAP that started to happen more and more. I know that it's something that
Hmm.
I think OECD likes to see and has asked GAC to bring in the past. And I think GAC has made that move. And I think there's always a tension. I know if I can recall from conversations I had 15 years ago when I was working inside the department. On in terms of how to
Hmm.
what extent they wanted to impose those kinds of standard results and indicators. I mean, that was a conversation several years ago. I think they've moved on from that. I think there's an acknowledgement of why that's important now. But I think there
Yeah.
is also, that sense of like wanting there's a tension or there's a balance between not wanting to impose, too much in terms of, ironically, in terms
Yeah.
of, indicators and kind of top down design of programs. And I mean, many partners might feel that they haven't. Whatever may have many opinions on where they've hit that balance, if they have or they haven't. Certainly, and that's all very fair. But I think there is
Hmm.
that tension in terms of not wanting to impose that, but also then wanting to really be able to demonstrate, ultimately, as they would say to taxpayers, that there's been an impact that's significant and substantial. And how you kind of balance between those two things
Yeah.
as well, I think is another dilemma that they face. But yeah, I mean, I think that,
Yeah.
though,
Absolutely.
in terms of what it means for this for next steps and for this particular report and initiative. I know that there's that GAC has responded and indicated um, some measures that they've indicated they want to address and try and move forward with. Um, it would be interesting, just to sort of hear your thoughts on the direction they've what the formal responses are that they've given, because they've had time to reflect on this, right? That's how these evaluations work. They would have
Hmm.
seen it for
Yeah.
a number of months earlier, had the chance to reflect on it, prepare their responses to the recommendations, and then address those.
Uh,
And so, yeah, it's interesting to see where they're moving with this potentially.
Yeah. Of the Yeah, I know there's a bit of a delay there. Um, of There were three main recommendations. Like they know they need to do better information management, and they've said that the transformation and address that around the level of results being measured, and they said they agreed with that, and they're going to look more at getting enterprise level KPIs. um the question though is this question of like, is this going to tighten up the freedom of partners to develop their own results frameworks and be responsive to their partners. The third we haven't touched on yet is around intersectionality and how global affairs, is measuring that. So, I feel like, we've both seen the movement from, mainstreaming GE through, the last 20 years now to, gender transformative programming being this, the standard at a certain level. And I feel like intersectionality is going to, become more and more integrated. I feel that though the pandemic probably didn't help. I feel like, so much focus was on, kind of shoring up traditional GE results that even having a conversation about intersectionality was difficult. And so I feel like, I think it's been delayed because of the context of the last few years. And I feel like global affairs needs to have express a clear understanding of what it means to them, and then we go through the machinations of, okay, what does that mean for results-based management, and what does that mean for our programming, and then it will become integrated. We just have to make sure that it doesn't get lost. We need to make sure that it's brought up consistently in our own conversations. So I think that that's a lot of trust in transformation initiative in it's kind of that deus ex machina that's coming in to lift global affairs from these critiques, and I feel that though what it needs to do is prove very early on in the initiative that it can actually extract the data and the results reporting from the results reporting that already exists. We do not want to see this downloaded onto partners. We want to see that the GAC end of it is able to actually absorb the reporting, because Jess, you and I know, like, the amount of work, time, money, everything that goes into reporting to global affairs is a huge chunk of our resources and the resources of partners, and we don't want that to come to, like, we know the programming is impacts. Let's get the system built so that it can actually extract the reporting that is already happening. And so that is actually leads to my final, I know we're running out of time, my final suggestion, and this from someone else, I didn't come up with this myself, but how do we leverage artificial intelligence here? I was meeting with some former colleagues from a project, and someone said they were using chat GPT to generate reporting, and I thought, for however many of our partners are brilliant technicians in the field, brilliant advisors, we're using all their time, and they're working in their second. What can we do to make the computers do that reporting for them? Because I would love to take that workload off the people who are the implementers. Global affairs, if you could find a way to make AI a part of the transformation initiative, it's actually going to contribute to decolonization, because it means that if we can find a way to have the meet some very onerous reporting, it's going to help everyone. So just I'll wrap up there because I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, and I mean, as always, I could continue this conversation for a very long time. And actually, it's interesting because I've heard, just very briefly, more broadly in the nonprofit sector, a conversation about how ChatGPT and AI can maybe help relieve a reporting burden more broadly for any kind of community, in responding to funders, and maybe maybe make that whole process a little bit easier, which I think does have some exciting potential. I mean, granted, as my kids will always remind me, though, ChatGPT itself has a lot of inherent biases, and we have to be really thoughtful about how we use it, of course, because I mean, speaking of intersectionality, it's there's not a lot of oversight over how it portrays ideas, and it has to be well used. But in any case, just to end here, because we are at time, though I think we probably could have easily made this an hour, but a couple, just a couple of final things. So I wanted to just one thing mention. I see that there's another great question here on the impact of this overall narrative that's now been shared with the world, in terms of the FIAP, right? And I think that's when I was saying it earlier at the beginning that I have a lot of empathy. I think that's the part that frustrates me, because I do think that if I look back many years ago, sitting around the table with some other gender equality specialists within the agency at the time, back when it was CETA, really wanting to try and create more accountability and more rigorous accountability around the impact that projects were having on gender equality. And I really do think that, look where we are now. It's, I mean, maybe I sound old, but whatever, but look where we are now in terms of, how the conversation in the sector has really profoundly changed, and the understanding of gender equality, has increased. And I think the commitment, is there for many organizations to really see that kind of impact. So I think, it's interesting in terms of the conversation in the sector. I think that's another impact that's quite exciting from the FIAP. I mean, that is a good question about how do you move forward from a sort of communications and engagement perspective, to say that they're actually, yes, we actually want to see more investment in this, not less, because we actually think there is potential for greater impact with more investment, right? So
Absolutely.
maybe I better end there, because we're going to keep going over time as well. But if you're interested, in this kind of conversation, please follow us both on LinkedIn. Maybe we'll do some more conversations like this in the future. And feel free to if you connect with me, I can add you to my team newsletter that goes out once a week as well. We give insights on the sector and also on government relations more broadly. And if you're interested in learning more about the work that I'm doing, feel free to reach out, look at my website, or also we have a training coming up next week as well on government relations for nonprofits that will include, a significant conversation about the international cooperation sector. And Margot, do you want to just wrap up now as well?
Yeah, sure. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I very soon will be doing more of the official launch of my consulting practice. I'm doing consulting work right now, but the more formal launch is coming up. Thanks so much, Jess.
Great.
This was fun.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.